Okay, we're reading chapter 11 of A Course in Miracles. The chapter is called God or the Ego, and this section is section 1, the gifts of fatherhood. You have learned your need of healing. Would you bring anything else to the sonship, recognizing your need of healing for yourself? For in this lies the beginning of the return to knowledge, the foundation on which God will help build again the thought system you share with Him. Not one stone you place upon it, but will be blessed by Him, for you will be restoring the holy dwelling place of His Son, where He wills His Son to be and where He is. In whatever part of the mind of God's Son you restored this reality, you restore it to yourself. You dwell in the mind of God with your brother, for God Himself did not will to be alone. To be alone is to be separated from infinity, but how can this be if infinity has no end? No one can be beyond the limitless, because what has no limits must be everywhere. There are no beginnings and no endings in God, whose universe is Himself. Can you exclude yourself from the universe or from God, who is the universe? I and my Father are one with you, for you are part of us. Do you really believe that part of God can be missing or lost to Him? If you were not part of God, His will would not be unified. Is this conceivable? Can part of His mind contain nothing? If your place in His mind cannot be filled by anyone except you, and your filling it was your creation, without you there would be an empty place in God's mind. Extension cannot be blocked, and it has no voids. It continues forever, however much it is denied. Your denial of its reality may arrest it in time, but not in eternity. That is why your creations have not ceased to be extended, and why so much is waiting for your return. Waiting is possible only in time, but time has no meaning. You who made delay can leave time behind simply by recognizing that neither beginnings nor endings were created by the Eternal, who placed no limits on His creation or upon those who create like Him. You do not know this simply because you have tried to limit what He created, and so you believe that all creation is limited. How then could you know your creations, having denied infinity? The laws of the universe do not permit contradiction. What holds for God holds for you. If you believe you are absent from God, you will believe that He is absent from you. Infinity is meaningless without you, and you are meaningless without God. There is no end to God and His Son, for we are the universe. God is not incomplete, and He is not childless. Because He did not will to be alone, He created a Son like Himself. Do not deny Him His Son, for your unwillingness to accept His fatherhood has denied you yours. See His creations as His Son, for yours were created in honor of Him. The universe of love does not stop because you do not see it, nor have your closed eyes lost the ability to see. Look upon the glory of His creation, and you will learn what God has kept for you. God has given you a place in His mind that is yours forever, yet you can keep it only by giving it as it was given you. Could you be alone there when it was given you because God did not will to be alone? God's mind cannot be lessened. It can only be increased, for everything He creates has the function of creating. Love does not limit, and what it creates is not limited. To give without limit is God's will for you, because only this can bring you the joy that is His and that He wills to share with you. Your love is as boundless as His, because it is His. Could any part of God be without His love, and could any part of His love be contained? God is your heritage, because His one gift is Himself. How can you give except like Him if you would know His gift to you? Give them without limit and without end to learn how much He has given you. Your ability to accept Him depends on your willingness to give as He gives. Your fatherhood and your Father are one. God wills to create, and your will is His. It follows then that you will to create, since your will follows from His, and being an extension of His will, yours must be the same. a moment. Yet what you will, you do not know. This is not strange when you realize that to deny is to, quote, not know, unquote. God's will is that you are his son. By denying this, you deny your own will and therefore do not know what it is. You must ask what God's will is in everything because it is yours. You do not know what it is, but the Holy Spirit remembers it for you. Ask him, therefore, what God's will is for you, and he will tell you yours. It cannot be too often repeated that you do not know it. Whenever what the Holy Spirit tells you appears to be coercive, it is only because you have not recognized your will. The projection of the ego makes it appear as if God's will is outside yourself and therefore not yours. In this interpretation, it seems possible for God's will and yours to conflict. God then may seem to demand of you what you do not want to give, and thus deprive you of what you want. Would God, who wants only your will, be capable of this? Your will is his life, which he has given to you. Even in time, you cannot live apart from him. Sleep is not death. What he created can sleep but cannot die. Immortality is his will for his son, and his son's will for himself. God's son cannot will death for himself because his father is life, and his son is like him. Creation is your will because it is his. You cannot be happy unless you do what you will truly, and you cannot change this because it is immutable. It is immutable by God's will and yours, for otherwise his will would not be extended. You are afraid to know God's will because you believe it is not yours. This belief is your whole sickness and your whole fear. Every symptom of sickness and fear arises here, because this is the belief that makes you want not to know. Believing this, you hide in darkness, denying that the light is in you. You are asked to trust the Holy Spirit only because he speaks for you. He is the voice for God, but never forget that God did not will to be alone. He shares his will with you. He does not thrust it upon you. Always remember that what he gives, he keeps, so that nothing he gives can contradict him. You who share his life must share it to know it, for sharing is knowing. Blessed are you who learn that to hear the will of your Father is to know your own, for it is your will to be like him, whose will it is that it be so. God's will is that his Son be one and unified with him in his oneness. That is why healing is the beginning of the recognition that your will is his. Okay, we can touch upon a few things here. This section is called the Gifts of Fatherhood. And in a number of places here, Jesus makes the point that God did not will to be alone. It's an interesting phrasing. What does he mean by that? And why is it called the Gifts of Fatherhood? Let's just touch upon that for just a moment. God's gift is himself. He says this in the middle of the passage. God is your heritage because his one gift is himself. How can you give except like him if you would know his gift to you? So God's gift is himself. So one other thing to point out here, which is an interesting echo and rephrasing of what Jesus says in the Gospels. He says, I and my Father are one with you, for you are part of us. So in the Gospels, we all know that Jesus said, I and my Father are one. Here he's saying, I and my Father are one with you. You know, when Jesus said, I and my Father are one, the effect of that is what you ask yourself, okay, that's great. Jesus is one with God. But what about me? Why am I not included in that? You know, why is there only one beloved Son of God? Does God play favorites? You know, does God have a special son that he that is is above the rest of us. And Jesus is here to say no. What Jesus is what we are. We're not any different than Jesus. We're all that. No one is left out. God did not will to be alone. And that means that we are all we are all included. And if anyone is left out, there is a sense in which God is alone, that God is not complete, because we are not complete, because we are God. And if we're not complete, then God is not complete. That would be when Jesus says God is not complete, of course God is complete. That's just saying, he's just saying that yes, God has never changed. Love has never changed. Our reality has never changed. It is only that we think that it has, and that we've done the unthinkable. We think that we have, or the impossible. We think that we have separated from God, and Jesus is saying that's impossible. That's laughable. That's a tiny mad idea that we could be separate from God, but that's not even possible. And if anyone is excluded from that, or if we're the thing is if we're excluding anyone from that, that's really what he's getting at, is if we're excluding in our mind anyone from the love of God, then we have excluded ourselves. We do not know what love is yet. Love, another point that Jesus makes here is that love is not coercive. And love, which is God, does not coerce. God does not, Jesus, God, the Holy Spirit, they don't force anything. Everything's up to us. Jesus is only here to present what he knows to be true, and what, if you're open to it, and obviously you are because you're here, then he's saying, okay, this is what you need to know what I know. I know that I am one with God. You don't know that you're one with God yet. You don't fully realize that yet. But I and my Father are one with you. And if you listen to what I'm saying here, and you learn to listen to the voice of the Holy Spirit, you will also get there just like me. I'm not above you. I am not God's only begotten Son or only beloved Son. We are all that. As soon as we start playing favorites and putting some above others, and this one's going to heaven, this one's going to hell, that is not the will of God. That's not what God is. And so we have, when we do that, we block our own way. We essentially say, well, I don't really know. I don't want to know what I am. I don't know. I don't want to know God. And so, we block. We're in our own way, and it's we followed the ego's way. Remember, this chapter is called God or the Ego. So we can only do one or two things, or there's only two things possible here, which is we either follow the way of love, or we follow the way of the ego. If we follow the way of the ego, we get further from love. If we follow the way of love, we get little by little, we find our way back. Anytime that we think that God wills something that we don't will, Jesus is making that point. It's only because we've allied with the ego. We believe the ego's trip. We believe the ego's thought system. We're thinking along those lines, And that's where the conflict arises. In God's, our will, our true will really is God's will, because we are one with God. I don't know, I don't want to belabor this, I'll let Jesus do that, because Jesus does that again and again. He's telling us over and over again what it is. I don't know if we need to say much more about this right now. I think we covered it. That God did not will to be alone. Which is just to say that God is what God has always been. There's no time. Jesus says here that time is an illusion. The eternal reality of which we are part of and which we share with God is still there, and it's always been there. Do we want that? If we want to know that reality again, then we take the steps. We take the baby steps that will bring us there. If we don't really want to know, then that's okay. We'll get there in our own good time, whenever we're ready. Time is an illusion. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter when we get there. We're already there. So, in a way, it ends up seeming absurd, the whole thing. But that's where, our minds really ultimately have to be blown to really understand what it is, because we can only think in terms of, we're very conditioned to the ego thought system. We can't, let me just read one other thing here that Jesus says. It cannot be too often repeated that you do not know God's will. That's why you have to listen to the Holy Spirit, right? As much as Jesus can tell us that the Holy Spirit does not judge, and there's no coercion, there's no forcing in love, and love is infinitely patient, infinite kindness, complete non-judgment. As much as we might, understand that intellectually, most of us, we need the reminder. We're not all the way there yet, and that's where we have to remember the Holy Spirit is that part of us that already knows, is in that place of complete non-judgment, and sees the perfection everywhere, sees the perfection in everything, in everyone. Anyway, I might have been rambling a bit tonight. I'm sorry about that. So, we're going to continue with the next section soon, and that is section 2, the invitation to healing. See you soon. Thank you.